Welcome everyone to episode 1 of our spring 2016 virtual office hours. I'm John Fia. I chair the history department at Messiah College and teach American history there. Abby Blakeney is back this season as our producer. Welcome back and Happy New Year, Abby. And we are here actually in my backyard. I am on sabbatical this year. So I didn't want to come into the office, but we do have the founding fathers here. You get a nice shot behind me of our barn, and there's some 19th century properties back there. I shouldn't say our barn. I don't own it, my neighbors do, but it's nice to look at in the back of my house. And we are back, and we are going to continue with our series on Was America Founded as a Christian Nation? Now, again, some of you know my book on that subject. We have been working with Westminster John Knox Press. The second edition of that book will be out in the fall, so I thought we would again continue to revisit some of the chapters in that book. Last semester, in our fall 2015 season, we talked a lot about the idea that America was founded as a Christian nation and how people thought about that idea. And I made an argument that for most of American history, people have always thought themselves as living in a Christian nation. This season, we're going to get into the early American history and the history of the American Revolution and really now start to think about the relationship between religion and the American founding. So today, I want to talk a little bit about the so-called colonies, the 13 colonies, if you will, that eventually rebelled from the British Empire and formed the United States in July of 1776. And for lack of time, I want to frame this by thinking about the role of religion in these colonies. There are a lot of pundits and politicians and bloggers and people on social media and activists who like to draw a direct line between the religious beliefs of the people living in the colonies and the documents that they produced and the founding of the United States. When you think about the founding of the colonies, you need to realize that the earliest colonies, Jamestown and New England, were founded in the early 17th century. The American Revolution, on the other hand, happened about 150, 160 years later. So we need to be very careful, I think, when we try to draw a direct historical line between those colonies and the American Revolution. I like to think of it as the difference between the planting of societies in British North America versus the founding of a nation. Now, today we want to focus a little bit on the planting and look at two colonies, or two regions, if you will. First, let's talk a little bit about Jamestown. Was Jamestown a Christian society? Well, again, it goes back to how we define our terms. Was there a Christian presence in Jamestown when it was founded in 1607 and in the decades following as it developed? Yes, there was. And actually, a lot of recent scholarship has suggested that religion was perhaps maybe more important in Jamestown than we have long made it out to be. Having said that, just because there's a presence of religion there, that doesn't necessarily mean that religion or Christianity would have defined the culture of Jamestown. And as I argue, and I've argued in the book, Jamestown, the culture of Jamestown is much more driven by economic motivations, mercantilism, tobacco, the pursuit of wealth, self-interest, or as the great early American historian T.H. Breen described Jamestown, quote unquote, looking out for number one. Now again, that could be, for some, a sort of Christian virtue. I don't particularly see that kind of economic acquisitiveness and self-interest as necessarily being a Christian virtue that defines life in the colonies in the way that perhaps Christianity defined another set of colonies to the north in New England, where you have Puritans founding places like Plymouth and Massachusetts Bay and Connecticut. Here, religion is very, very important, and indeed the founders of these colonies are trying to create Christian societies. But they're also trying to create very specific kinds of Christian societies. I like to say you're religiously free in Massachusetts Bay Colony in the 17th century, but you're only religiously free enough to follow the beliefs of the Puritans, or else you're going to get kicked out, as we learned from people like Anne Hutchinson and Roger Williams and others. So, is that a Christian society? Certainly, the Christian culture of New England does not uphold an idea of religious freedom that we would understand today, or that many sort of conservative Christians today argue for when they talk about religious freedom. If you did not conform to a specific teaching, the Puritan orthodoxy as it was known, you were going to be removed from the colony, and in some cases you may have been either imprisoned, or as in the case of the Quaker Mary Dyer, hung, killed as a result of this. So what does it mean to be a Christian society? That's a huge issue here, and I've just suggested some ways to think about it. But I think we need to be careful when we draw direct lines between either Jamestown or the New England colonies, or for that matter the middle colonies, Pennsylvania, New York, and New Jersey, because these were so far removed, over 150 years removed from the time of the founding. And many of the ways Christianity played themselves out in these colonies might make certain members of, say, the Christian right, or those who are arguing for a Christian nation, rather uncomfortable. So there's our start. We're getting into some complicated stuff. We're trying to address this stuff with some complexity and nuance. And we will continue then to move now towards the revolution in our next episode. But thanks for watching, and we will see you next time on the Virtual Office Hours.